Have you ever wished you could travel all over the world and meet masterful people in the field of education? People you may not have known and the stories you've never heard. Cup of Capacity is just that. I wanted to introduce you to masterful people in education. Some are people I have known, and some I have heard about. They were chosen for their unique impact on education and to share the insights they've learned along the way. In a digital setting, each monthly episode features an in-depth conversation with a masterful leader as they explore their journey and answer a series of questions. Grab a refreshment and let's enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cup of Capacity. I am Dr. Mechiel Rozas, and this is something that we do every month for fun. I started this as really part of my doctoral work where we learned that capacity building is so important. And so I really had a desire to interview people that I admire, that I know have phenomenal stories. And today is an exact example of that. Dr. Jill Siler is the kind of person whose introduction could go on forever because she has accomplished so much in her life. She is the author of Thrive Through the Five, which is a practical guide to lead through challenging times. And how could we have known in September when this was published, and probably a year or two while you were writing, that we would need this brilliant thinking so much in our lives? Jill is also the superintendent of Gunter ISD, which is located north of Dallas, Texas. I met Jill several years ago when we both spoke in front of the Texas Council of Women's School Executives. And I feel like that was a corner turning event for me. I'm not sure about for her. There are educational leaders to watch, and Jill is definitely one of them. And I want to thank you for being with us today.
Well, great. It is so great to be with you. And yes, I'm sure that's going to come out as we have our conversation today. But that time on stage was also a watershed moment for me too. And so I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So tell us, really, the point of today is really just tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I started as a teacher and a coach, although honestly, my story doesn't start there. I grew up in upstate New York and I went to the University of Pittsburgh. I was a swimmer. And so I was loved being in college and swimming, but wasn't quite sure about what I was going to do. And so I kind of had my plan A, B, C, and D, like I took my LSAT, my GRE, my GMAT, like I had all the bases covered. And I was coming to the University of Texas at Austin for graduate school. My parents lived in Texas. They moved from New York right as I went to college. And so I was really going there to kind of be near my parents, and was going to study. I was a politics and philosophy major. I was going to go in to study government at the University of Texas. And right before I went to start graduate school, I was asked to work in FCA camp, a Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp. And so I was teaching and coaching high school girls for the first time and totally fell in love. And so I still moved to Austin, but my plans quickly changed. And I got my certification to become a teacher and loved teaching and coaching. I was in the Austin area for 16 years and taught and coached there for 6, and then felt the call to go into leadership and was an assistant principal, an associate principal, and then moved into central office, was a director and an executive director. And then in 2012, took the big jump to become a superintendent. And I have been here. This is my 9th year.
Wow, that's amazing. So I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit about your journey into writing a book? Because I think that's something that very few people can say they've done.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've loved every stage that I've been in. I loved my time being in the classroom. Like my classroom was my sanctuary. I love the autonomy that I have. I loved just having that like physical, tangible impact with kids, but a tangible impact, right? It was like right there in front of me, just working with kids every day. And I love my time as a campus leader too, like absolutely loved it. Moving into central office, I loved supporting teachers and leaders, loved that work. And being in the superintendency, I have loved this as well. I love being able to set a tone and foster a positive culture. I love that I get to make decisions that impact an entire community. And so that has been incredible. And I've loved it for the past, 8 or 9 years. And so as you are in the superintendency, I know I was listening to your interview with Dr. Salazar Zamora this morning, and you were talking about the number of female superintendents, which there are not many. And so it's wonderful to do this work as a female alongside of incredible superintendents like her as well. But one of the other statistics is that the average tenure of a superintendent is less than 3 years. And so you know that going into these roles. And so I've had this incredible gift to be in this community for the past 9 years, which, shatters those averages, but I've loved being here. It's a small community. We have 1,000 students. And so I have learned and grown and been challenged so much in this time. But there's certainly those questions that come of like, so what are you doing next? Or are you moving on to a different district? Or, all of those sorts of things. And so I've felt torn for a long time of this desire and calling to stay where I'm at because we deeply love this community in which we serve, but also this call to, can I be doing something greater to impact more people than the 1,000 students here in Gunter ISD? And when I was on stage with you just 2 years ago, just kind of had this watershed moment of, you don't have to leave where you're at in order to lead in the way that you're being called to. And I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew that there had been another call that was placed on my life and I needed to be faithful to that. And so it just kind of started as a series of baby steps, one of which was speaking at that TCWSE. It was my first kind of like TED Talk experience. And it was incredible to be there with you and so many other gifted leaders and speakers. But it kind of just started this ball rolling of what is that for me? And so when I was at that the midwinter conference right before that opportunity that we had, I remember telling a good friend of mine that I wanted to write a book, and like couldn't even barely utter those words out loud. Like there was so much kind of just fear and angst around that. And quickly, like as quickly as I said those words, I want to write a book, I followed it up with, but I was kind of thinking about writing it with someone else, like an older, distinguished gentleman. And she just looked me straight up and said, absolutely not. Like you can do this on your own. You do not need to partner with anyone else. Because it wasn't like we had this collaboration. It was really just, I don't know if I can do it. So I must have to tag myself onto someone else. And it just started as a dream that I gave voice to and took baby steps. I started a blog. I just researched authors who were doing similar things like I was, a practitioner in the field, but also writing, and made a goal of calling 10 of them over the summer and just had really good conversations and asked all sorts of questions, and continued to write and continue to publish just on my blog site until I got to a place where I was ready to put together a proposal. And Dave Burgess Consulting accepted it, and there we went.
That's amazing. I think we all share that we really admire and celebrate people who go for it, whatever the dream is that people, because there are always going to be obstacles in the way. So I'm curious, we all know as educational leaders that if you ask any group, you could be talking to elementary students or high school students or parents, and you would ask, do you see yourself as a reader? We all identify as a reader in some ways, because even if we don't enjoy reading for pleasure, we have to read as part of our jobs. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering if the journey for you as a writer, did it change in any way how you see the role of writing, and especially in the lives of the students in your school district?
Yeah, so I'll tell you that my journey as a writer has been one with ups and downs. Like I have this vivid memory of being really proud of, I was not a very good student in high school. I wasn't terrible, but I wasn't stellar. But I had this memory of writing something. It was my sophomore year, and being so proud of it. It was a personal, like my voice was really present in it, although I wouldn't have used those words at that time to describe it. And I remember the feedback that I got back on that paper was so negative, from a very rule-based, grammatical stance of, I was trying to convey something, and they were much more concerned with the grammar that was in the paper and whatnot. And I remember thinking like that, it really informed my view of myself as a writer. And as I went through college, that improved slightly. I did pretty well in college. And then as I went to my master's, I definitely got a lot more feedback and felt like I was a really strong writer. And by the time I went through my doctoral program, I realized like, this is one of your strengths. And it's, I mean, is going through that doctoral program. If you're not a strong writer, it's going to be a struggle, because reading, writing, and analyzing, like, those are the core tenets of that work. And so, but I also realized as I was going through my doctoral program that I really didn't love writing. I was good at it, but I didn't love it. And I think the difference between writing for a very serious research-based stance, like a dissertation with so many rules, it serves a purpose. Like, I very much learned how to research and make sure that everything was, backed up and, to the T, but it wasn't something that I necessarily enjoyed. And so as I take that experience and then mesh it with this idea of writing for not pleasure, but writing for a purpose that I really felt was going to have a significant impact on people, it has been great to see that journey. And I loved writing the book. It was hard, like one of the hardest things I've ever done. I mean, in terms of size, just to put it in comparison, my dissertation was probably, I don't know, 40. I think my dissertation was right around 25,000 words. And the book, the first manuscript I submitted, was 60,000. So it was massive in scope. And to the point where, like, in your dissertation, everything is so confined. Like, chapter 3 is your research, and chapter 2 is your literature review, and chapter 1 is your introduction, right? And so you didn't get lost in that because you were writing very succinct pieces that all came together in the end. But in a book, there were so many times where I'd have to hit like Control F to find, did I talk about this story already? Have I used this resource already? Because it was so immense. And so it was a great challenge and I loved it. And I also have had a great opportunity to talk with our students about it, not wide scale, but in different classes as teachers have been inviting me just to share that perspective. And I think for them to see someone that they actually know be able to publish something that they can hold in their hands and say, hey, that's on Amazon, that's a cool experience for them too.
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. I really feel like, because most people would identify themselves as readers, whether they enjoy it or not. And, more like, because we know nationally 60% of all students are reading below grade level. So, most likely you're going to get responses where somebody's like, I don't really enjoy reading that much, but I can do it okay. But it's very rare to find somebody who enjoys writing or has a passion for writing or has accomplished a publishable piece. And so your doctoral work, and then along with your book, I think sets you apart and it makes you unique that way. As you think about literacy overall, reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and leading your community through the school district, what comes to mind for you when you think about literacy?
I think the most important thing is that we establish a love for reading. And so, when I look at our district and what holds value, especially at the primary grades, it is rich in literature. And so just creating that culture of reading, every day, having, reading goals and having that be a part of the family commitment, which is what we try to do with our families. Like, that has been a core tenet of what I think has brought so much success to our community. We've also done different literature projects like, Texas Reads One Book, where as an entire school district community, we've bought into reading one book together and talking about it and posting about it. Our schools do a really good job of bringing in guest readers. And so I've had the opportunity to go to campuses and read to them as well. One of our favorite literature events that we do is at the beginning of the year, we'll bring out members of our varsity football team, varsity cheerleaders, volleyball, band members, and they'll come down to the elementary school and each of them will bring their favorite book, including our varsity football coach. And he'll talk about not only what his favorite book was growing up, but what he's currently reading. And just to see the impact of that on our students, these people that they're looking up to as like superstars, talking about their love for reading, I think all of that plays a huge part.
Absolutely. That love of, when people can see the love and the passion, it really inspires them. And I think the cool factor, like you said, if it's a football player or football coach or, band or whatever, elementary kids are really looking up to those teenagers. And if they hear that they have a love and they put time into reading, then they're more likely to build that as well. So I'm curious, as you're reading for pleasure or for work, what's your favorite snack?
So I am a sugar fanatic, right? So I love like jelly beans and hot tamales, and Mike and Ike's would probably be my favorite. But while I was doing my doctoral work, it was M&Ms. I'm not sure why it works like that, but those are my go-tos.
Okay. And if you woke up tomorrow and you had to choose a completely different career and it could not be in education, what career would you pursue?
Oh my goodness. I really thought that I was going to be an attorney. That was one of my kind of like first goals, or just corporate business. My dad was a CEO. And so probably one of those two fields,
Awesome.
but I wouldn't like him as much.
Yeah. So my last question is really a wondering for myself. As you've gone through this journey, I did a fun creative project where every month you kind of journaled and reflected for your own personal self. So I was kind of wrapping up doing December, and I was writing like, who would have thought in January of last year, the journey we would have gone on. And so I'm wondering, as you've gone through this journey of going through the pandemic and supporting the district to continue to function and to serve children and their families during this time, what do you feel like are some big ahas or big learnings or big pieces that you're walking away with?
That's a great question. Over the summer, I had a really neat opportunity to interview Daniel Pink. He's the author of the book Strive and then the book When. And we had a great interview talking about his latest book, When. But one of the question that I ended with was just, out of everything that he's done, everything that he's written, everything that he's read, all of the leaders that he's interviewed to write these books, and the context that we're in, which is in the midst of this global pandemic and so many just civil unrest, there's just a lot of things going on. How best would you lead? And he answered with a couple of responses. And the first was just to put a premium on the care of our people. Like, if there's one thing that I've realized this past year, just not realized, but reiterated, it was so just underscored for me, is how incredible the people are that we work with, and how critical the work that they do is, right? So that's one of the biggest challenges of leading as a superintendent, is here you're leading at this 30,000 foot level. But really what your attention and your focus needs to be on is the people who are making the magic happen day in, day out in their classrooms, in the cafeteria lines, on the buses. And so this season has been really difficult because you have, the students' academic needs and their social and emotional wellness on one side. And then you have the physical health of everyone in the organization on the other. And those have conflicting needs when it comes to what do the people need. And so that's been really challenging. But I'd still say, regardless, the decisions that we make and the decisions that we've made have been with the people in mind, all of the people in the system. And that's first and foremost. The second thing that he talked about was just leading with transparency and humility. And so as we've approached this pandemic, my stance has been to be as open as we possibly can, but also as candid as we can, which means that we're not going to know all the answers. Like I was joking this morning, here we are in December. It is December of 2020, and we are still making decisions about how we're handling things when it comes to COVID, because everything keeps changing as we keep learning and growing. And so to just be humble about that and to say, hey, we are learning, we are growing, and we're going to get better at this as we go. And then the third thing that he mentioned was that, are you leading in a way that you're going to be proud of when you look back 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And are you clinging to those values? And I think that that's been really important. So those have been a couple of the things that I would say that I've learned this past year.
That's phenomenal. And I think it sounds like a great second book for you. Just going to I love what you said as the last thing about clinging to your values, but the second point you made really resonates with me, because I do have we were talking earlier, I have a teenager who's about to graduate and go out into college. And for the first time, even though, he would like to be that mature, cool adult, they're moving in between childhood and adulthood. And this year really let him see that the adults did not have all the answers. We're trying to navigate something we've never experienced ourselves. And it was different for them because kids are used to, whether it's a mom or a teacher or a principal, everybody having a plan and this is what we're going to do, and kind of coming with that approach. And so I think a lot of our high school kids got to really see adults making the best decision they could in the moment,
Yeah.
and hopefully modeling their thinking, like you said, being very transparent and like, this is what we know. So therefore, this is what we're going to do. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Siler, so much. I appreciate your time. And I think that your journey and your life really does speak to the power of building capacity over time.
Oh, great. Thanks so much for having me, Michelle.
Of course.
Hey, thanks for listening to this interview. I hope you found value in the conversation, made a connection with your own life, and had an aha moment or two.